Hello everyone, my name is Claudia Torres and I'm a student at UNAD. Today I'd like to speak about assessment strategies for learning in e-learning model. Every time we think about assessment, some words like exams, tests, and quizzes come across our minds. But there are many factors that we should keep in mind every time we're creating resources for e-learning environment. So let's talk about the curriculum and context. Now, let's talk about the curriculum. The curriculum has to do with goals, contents, and syllabus. So that's why the assessment should target the goals and should include all the vocabulary, grammar structures, and other topics that students should learn over the school year. So that's why they are very important and we have to consider them while creating e-learning material. So, for example, if according to the syllabus, this year students were supposed to learn present simple, so the materials I create should be focused on that goal. So now, let's move on the context. The context is vital because, take for example, our current situation. Due to coronavirus, many schools and universities have been forced to explore new options, including e-learning. Were they ready for e-learning? Many of them not. And if we think about our students, some of them, they don't even have computers. So context is very important because it might have an impact on the teaching learning process. Also, we need to know what our students' realities, right? So, and also their first language, because the way they learn their first language is different to the way they learned English as a second language. So we can say as a strategy, we can use the fact that in Spanish we talk about the age as something that we have, right? But in English you don't have the years. You have to use the verb to be instead. So having that knowledge and using those resources when creating e-learning material, it must be a difference. Now, learners' needs and wants. Okay, this is very important because as teachers, we need to know our students. Why? Because we have to personalize the materials we create according to their abilities, their learning levels, and also about their likes, what they enjoy, what they dream about. Okay, now let's talk about resources. So the resources are very important because I know that sometimes as teachers we are very busy and we don't have time and we tend to download material from the different websites, but we have to avoid legal issues, and this has to do with copyright. Okay. And now availability. So availability is important because we need to know in advance before our class and before we create the material, especially for e-learning. So for example, if I create some e-learning material at school, I would like to work at the computers lab, right? But let's say that the computers lab in my school, they don't have internet access. So, or maybe my students don't have access to internet if they're at home. So it might be very difficult for them, right? And especially I have to understand that not all my students may have a computer or a tablet due to their socioeconomic conditions, right? And educational facilities, it was about the computer labs example. Okay. Time. So time is something we, as teacher, we need to manage all the time, right? So when we're creating e-learning material, we need to create this material in advance, right? And also we need to check the classroom management, because we need to plan how long it's gonna take for my students to finish every stage of the task. Interactivity and attractiveness. Interactivity and attractiveness is crucial, because even from children to adults at every level, they want attractive material, something appealing, colorful, something that, for example, for adults, something that it looks sophisticated but is enjoyable. Okay. So now let's talk about personal confidence and competence. I would say that this is one of the most important things when teaching e-learning material, because as teachers you should inspire your students, and the way you can inspire your students is having an excellent English level, being respectful and responsible, and being confident of him or herself. Okay. So now let's move on. The design. Planning the design is key. I would say it's key. So, for example, instructions. Instructions are very important for assessment, because sometimes we should avoid explain the instructions. Instructions should be clear enough for the students to understand what to do, and they also must be familiar with the kinds or with the types of questions, okay, they are facing in the test. So for example, here this is a Mimi. So in class you have an instruction for homework, you have another one, but during the test it's a complex instruction, so they get confused, right? Now, format. So as I told you before, they should be familiar with the formats, with the different kinds of formats. So you have tests, portfolios, homeworks, quizzes, but you also have to keep in mind how often, right? Which is the frequency. How often should I set a homework, or how often should I deliver a test, and the number of questions, and according to the time. And okay, so now answers. So answers should also be clear. Okay, and as a teacher, you have to anticipate different scenarios. So for example, here, I know this question is in Spanish, but the answer is exactly the same, but in a different order. And just because of that, it was wrong, right? So, and you also, as a teacher, okay, you shouldn't have lots of errors or typos, okay, and everything must be must make sense. Okay, the feedback. Well, the feedback is really important. So feedback should be based on a rubric like this. So for example, here the students, once they finish the evaluation, they can compare, they can contrast the rubric with their results, and then they will understand that the evaluation is fair, right? Because they follow some standards, and so they will have better expectation next time. And also the feedback should be meaningful, should be descriptive, as I told you before in the rubric, and should be on time. So here's another meaning. So as teachers, I know we're very busy, but we should hand out the feedback with the evaluation as soon as possible. Okay, so that was the design. That's all for today. I'll show you some references.